Welcome, welcome. This is Sharon Little. I'm with Music for People, and I'm doing a series now talking to our musicianship and leadership program grads. Once they've left the program, they go off and do wonderful, wonderful things. And I'm really happy to talk to Josée Allard, all the way from Montreal. She's about 10 hours from me. And Josée and I met during one of our week-long programs. We did some crazy improvs and recordings. But I wanted to talk to Josée and see her story so that you can see where people come from, how they get into Music for People, and how they get out and what they're doing. She's doing some really fantastic things, new programs right now. So Josée, bienvenue, welcome. It's so good to see you.
I'm so happy to be here too. It's great memories coming up.
Oh my gosh, it's been a while. So I'd like to start out just seeing how, people come into Music for People in all different kinds of ways. So just briefly, what's your story of, I know you're a classical pianist like me, so I know our training is not improv, it's not making mistakes, it's not play. And some of us really have to get through some emotional stuff to let go of that training and still enjoy it and use our training. So how was that for you? How did you get to Music for People, Josée?
Well, I'll tell you a little bit of my story just to give you an idea of how it all started. When I was about 5 or 6, I was very creative, like I was composing, improvising all kinds of musical stories. And then as classically trained pianist, I went into the full training to become a classically trained pianist. And I entered the world of competition and I was doing well in competition. So I put everything aside, my creative creative side, I put it on the side in favor of musical performance. And, the more I was doing competitions and I was doing well, the more I was feeling the pressure of becoming a concert pianist, and the more I was feeling the pressure, the less fun I was having. And so I was doing super well in competitions, but I was becoming less and less happy with music in general. And no wonder that I developed injuries like many classical pianists or musicians in general. And when you feel that you've trained for so long to play an instrument and that you can't play anymore, it's pretty frustrating and sad, yes. And I've seen that in many of my colleagues, unfortunately. So I started teaching, and because I couldn't play. And then when I was teaching, some students would come in my studio and they wanted to learn to improvise and compose. They were not by the book students, and I was like, "Oh, what do I do with this?" And so around my 30s, I started to look for different ways of making music, and I joined Monique Poirier's workshop in Montreal, and I loved them. And I wanted to go further and see, look at the source of this whole process. And so I went to a week-long AOI workshop with David Darling, and it was like a revelation for me to finally be able to create my own music, which I didn't think was possible. And I came back from this week on a cloud, that lasted for about a month. And no kidding. And I'm sure that many of the people who went to AOI felt the same way. It's a drug, you're addicted. So I just tasted that drug, and I transmitted that drug to my students, and they were having fun. And with some students that are not fitting the classical training so much, and especially these days, there are still people who want to learn the traditional way, but there's more and more people who want to learn by ear, by intuition, by creating their music. And there's so many on YouTube videos on how you can create your own music on top of images. And so students see that and they want to get into that. And I was able to help them. And also it helped me to recover from my perfectionism that I inherited from the classical world. And Yeah, this idea of making mistakes, allowing myself to play some what we call wrong notes, but there are no wrong notes at Music for People, so it's good news. And I developed more inner listening and more sense of rhythm and pulse, and it opened me up also to all kinds of different sounds. And because I was listening to a lot of classical music, but I was not in contact so much with world music, ethnic music, or drum music, or whatever, self-expression was kind of strange to me. And then I completely adopted it at that moment, because I wanted to find a way of making music that where you didn't have to think so much, because there are many types of improvisation. And when I teach improvisation or I facilitate, people think that there's so many harmony rules to learn, and that you have to improvise in a certain style with, rigid parameters. And yeah, I mean, they can exist, but I was glad that there was this other way also of making music more intuitively. And so, I graduated 4 years later, but it was not so much for the certificate, because the certificate was, secondary. I was having too much fun doing it and seeing the people all over, and growing, internally with all these people. And there's this human part that is so interesting with Music for People, that you always remember the people you improvise with, especially you, Sharon, that we shared so many great improvisations together that are memorable. So, I mean, this is why, and this is how I entered this world of improvisation with Music for People.
I love these stories because there are a lot of really similar pathways in, and there seem to be some commonalities about a specific belief about musician and music making, and then even beliefs about improvisation. Many of my friends are jazz musicians, and they have very specific instrumentation and structures and chord changes that they play over. And one of the things that we talk about in Music for People now is that this is social music improvisation, and that it is all in community, and that beyond, since there are no lead sheets and there are no songs that we play particularly, this is a really authentic, deep, personal way of expression. And that seems to be where people find the most joy. And then they can go out and do other things as well. But coming in and finding that personal voice. And you've had a couple of students say that to you. I've just read on one of your posts that there's one student had come back and said, this was a whole path towards self-expression and finding their own voice.
That's the gift out of it, is that people find themselves through their sound. And I find it's very liberating, and it's powerful, and it's opening up to being creative also in general. It's not rare that we see MFPers creating art, dancing. It's like we want to express ourselves so dearly, after meeting with these built rights, or like this philosophy of self-expression and improvisation. So I think it's it's priceless, the gift that we receive from Music for People.
It's hard to think about what life was like before. For me, it's been over 30 years. So, when did you graduate from your program? Because you were after
28.
2008. Okay.
2008.
So
yeah.
That's been, I was 2000. So that's been quite a journey for you. So once you left MFP, you did the certification, which is all about your own stuff. It's not about the certification, but there you go. What was the next short step because you took this stuff into what you were already doing, and it feels like that was a transition for 10 or 15 years until you've created this new thing. So let's talk just really briefly about that first move into, okay, I'm taking musicianship and musician improvisation into my classical music piano studio. And sometimes that can be a bit of a niggly jarring. So how did you do that? What are some of just a few things?
Well, I think I took some of the MFP techniques, like starter points, and I brought them into my own studio as piano techniques that I could do with my students. And then I found also other resources that were similar to MFP, created for piano only, and that I could bring into my studio. And because people want to come and improvise in private, or even just learning to improvise at the piano, they want to learn to improvise, but not necessarily only in a self-expression way. They want some structure sometimes. But I found material that was so close to Music for People, at the same time having prompts to help people to start with, and I mixed them all together into something that I found was helping people to have some vocabulary as well as expressing themselves with some MFP techniques.
So it was kind of like making a bridge between what they were already doing and expanding, even just expanding their classical music stuff into improvisation, or expanding from just bringing, playing a note on the piano to putting a little structure on it. It sounds like you created some bridges between those worlds.
Yeah, I used some MFP techniques, like very specific MFP techniques, but I also tried to find other material, other books that were about improvising intuitively, but giving a little bit of vocabulary, because we know that at Music for People, we're not improvising with skills so much. We're not using theory information or anything like that. But I noticed that a lot of my students were coming, and just improvising intuitively at the piano was not necessarily enough for them, and strange. And I knew, because at Music for People, it's in a group, so there's always someone giving you like a response, like an idea to improvise with, and there's a texture of another instrument. But when you're alone, what do you do, when you want to self-express yourself? So I try to guide them, but not with rigidity of too much theory. That is still my guideline when I teach improvisation.
And at Music for People and at our AOI, Art of Improvisation, like everything about Music for People is accessible to everyone. And so everything we do we have to have entry points for people who have zero music experience, and for those who are highly classically trained. And literally, and I know this is always a hard thing for people to get, is that we can bring people together into a quartet or a trio or a duet, and where there's someone who is literally never made a sound or played a note on anything in their lives, with someone who has been playing in orchestras or jazz bands for decades, and they make music together. And that's the miracle of Music for People, I think. And that but when we come into private lessons, we need maybe something a little different. Yeah. So you were teaching at a school, you had your own private students, and
also I was leading groups. I did a little business class after, also to, how do I introduce this thing, this philosophy, and to announce it, and so people could understand what it was all about. And so I led groups of teachers, school teachers, piano music teachers too, some students of colleagues, non-professional, and personal growth, environment, or stuff like that. So I did a little bit of that, but at a certain point, where I live is not so big, so I can't store so many djembes and drums and at my place, and also to be hired sometimes by places where I didn't know which instrument they would have, so I had to make up something on the spot, so it's pretty demanding to go somewhere and not knowing, especially if you present something in a conference and you don't know which instrument you're going to have. And at a certain point, also because this whole process of leading groups outside this already, existing piano studio was pretty demanding to do both, because it's a different mentality. It's a different. So I kind of put it on the side after a while, because I also wanted to compose and find my own music, and that takes time. So I did that for a couple of years. I made 2 albums of improvisation and stuff, some compositions, and after a while I thought improvisation and leading and improvisation should come first, because I was still a piano teacher teaching improvisation. And I wanted to make improvisation as the main thing in my life, because once you start being immersed in it, it's this drug again, and there's some popcorn in your head when you start improvising. And I wanted to have that every day, and not wonder so much about teaching the classical repertoire so much. And so this is why a year ago I took everything that I did in the past years of training teachers or teaching my students improvisation, and I gathered this whole material into a piano improvisation program, which I started online, because it was fitting more of the the practical needs, but also because piano is also my main instrument. I also sing, but piano is my main instrument, and I have a great love for my instrument. And I thought this is where I developed more resources also over the years. And so I'm grateful for the 30 years that I taught privately, because I tested so many of this material, with so many people. And some books that I'm using, a lot of teachers are telling me, we bought these books, but we don't know what to do with them. But right. It's the training at Music for People that gave me the entrance door, to these books, and to know what to do, even though nobody had shown me what to do with these books, but I kind of knew instinctively what to do. So
well, tell me about this program now. So that, how is it set up? Who are you teaching? How does it work? How can people get to it who are classically trained pianists, or who want to get into this? And I think people who are sometimes classically trained pianists want that extra, or anybody just wants that extra little guidance, where it's really more specific. We can get them to Music for People stuff, and that's a whole thing. And then they want to have something specific. So tell me just briefly how this course works, who comes, how do they get to it, what's in it?
Well, I give access to people who have an intermediate level, let's say, some backgrounds in piano, because full beginners, it will be too hard. But it's still not a difficult program. It's just that you need to have some basis in piano playing. And I would say 14 years old and up. For now, it's mostly adults. I have mostly piano teachers, but there are still people coming. I had a philosophy teacher who had stopped playing for 20 years and didn't want to come back the same way she learned before. And so she wanted to try my program. And she said, and that happened to me, and that happens to people. She said, I recovered my musicianship and the love for my instrument, and even playing the old repertoire she was playing in a different way, or with more pleasure, with more fun. So I'm accepting these people with great, I'm really open to these people, because I find that people who stop playing and who don't want to go back the same way are very, they will fit very well with this type of program. So the program is including some MFP, and I'm always talking about, once people register to my program, I'm almost all the time talking about MFP, how grateful I am, and the techniques that I'm using are mostly from Music for People. And so I'm using the basic techniques that we're using in Music for People, the melody drone, the ostinato drone, and I find in the repertoire those examples also, that they can, oh, that piece I was teaching a student is like a drum on the bass, and it's like and so they understand better how the music is written. I teach different styles, ethnic styles, world music, a little bit of chord progressions, but in a very simple way, so they can start creating their own songs. They want to accompany themselves creating songs, a little bit of learning by ear, what to do with a song by ear if you want to improvise on it. And I'm using very simple books for that. And so I touch all kinds of styles, and I add up a few modules on free improvisation only, where I know that people are going to be a little lost sometimes. It's like, what are we doing here? But I find that it's my gift to them to, give them access to this type of improvisation. They come more to my program wanting to learn how to sit and sound beautiful. Most of the time, it's how they want to sound, but I'm slowly guiding them through, this process. So we meet once a week, 3 weeks out of a month, and so they have 1 week off for 6 months, and I supervise their videos once a week, 4 weeks. Every month, they send me their home place, what we call it Music for People. So on a technique or an example that we worked on, and so I'm commenting on our private Facebook group on their video. They have access to Zoom recordings 24/7 of me teaching this whole program for 6 months, teachable PDFs that they can download also, that they can keep forever. So it's like an immersion in improvisation for 6 months. And of course, they can go over if they like, because, it's a long-term process. But overall, that's the idea of this program. And it's called Creative Piano Artistry. Because I know that for me, when I started composing, I realized it's the improvisation process that brought me to composition. And I know that a lot of people come to me and saying, I wish I could compose. Or they come to my master classes, and at the end they said, oh, I'm finally having an idea to finish my composition. And so I added up a module on composition where I have guests to teach composition, a little bit about arrangement too. So it's like when I say creative piano, so how can you create with this instrument in different ways, all kinds of ways, stories, poems, and all of that.
Sounds really very holistic, very MFP-ish, very fun. And it sounds like you've got a really interesting crew of people who have taken this on. And do you do workshops every once in a while as well?
I do master classes to introduce people to, they're free once a month. Sometimes it's 5 days, sometimes it's 3 days, sometimes it's just a webinar, an hour and a half. But I like that people see me and see how I'm doing this thing. And so they're more confident to register afterwards. And of course, I have all kinds of free resources to send people when they're interested in what I'm doing. I started doing it in French for the first 6 months because French is my first language. And then I switched now to English. And also because I was interested in meeting people from all over the world. I mean, there are some French people in Africa and Europe, that's for sure. But most people, the international language is English. And I mean, I can still teach in both. If people come to me in French, I'll speak French, and it's the language of my heart, that's for sure. But I find that it's this new way of being with improvisation has brought me to meet people that are so interesting from different parts of the world doing creative work, and some music therapists, some all kinds of people from Kosovo, from England, and it's so interesting to meet all these people. And I had some people using other philosophy like Dalcroze coming to my workshops, and we share about the different approaches, and that's very enriching, I find.
Sounds like you need to do a bit of a world tour and do some live workshops. So I'll just leave that with you.
Well, I'll be open to it for sure. I mean, if people want to invite me, I love in person. It's just this online new approach was also, okay, I'm going to say this for all musicians, not that you have to do it, but the it's really up to each of us to decide. But in my case, it's because I couldn't. I was renting a place before, and it's money, and I was not able to have 25 students coming to my place because I live in a condo and there are rules. But also because musicians usually were so spread out in everything we do that sometimes we burn out. And this whole idea of having an online program was also to gather my energy towards one goal and stop doing things all over the place and gather my energy and having some free time to create a little more. And and having a life, because sometimes as musicians, we're so everywhere that our life is taken, on the side.
Well, it sounds, Josée, I mean, this really sounds remarkable. I love how you've taken what you've done with Music for People, plus all of your years and years and decades of piano training, and made some shifts and created something that's really of our time, that is accessible to everyone. So we'll have your website. What information do people need to know? Where can they find you online, on social? And we'll have these in the video as well, but where can they find this?
Quickly, it's creativemusic.ca is my website. I have a Creative Music Facebook page. I have The Music in You, which is my private community group. And of course, Josée Allard is my profile on Facebook. I'm on Instagram also on Josée Allard, and on LinkedIn on Josée Allard, so people can find me. And I'm slowly transitioning to English. Every page will be in English only, so I mean people can communicate with me easily. But creativemusic.ca is my website.
Josée, thank you. This has really been fun. Like, we've talked a little bits and pieces, but what I really love about doing this is I get you all to myself for about 15 or 20 minutes, so we can really dive into to what you're doing. And I love the sound of this. I love what is happening. I know that people are getting transformed and finding their voice. Thank you for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate this. And is there anything else at the end that you'd like to finish up with? Anything we've missed? Because I know the brain starts going.
Well, first, I want to say I'm so grateful for this interview and grateful for MFP family and David Darling and Mary Knish and Irene, who's also a friend and colleague, Irene Ferrer. But I want to say, what I remind my students is a quote from David Darling: relax into your own beauty. And that stays with me all the time, and that's what I discovered, that we don't need to be perfect to make music, and that music can be so powerful and simple at the same time when it's heartfelt.
That's beautiful. David had some good quotes, that's for sure. I love relax into your beauty. So for those of you who don't know Music for People, we are at musicforpeople.org. We are on Facebook. We have a Facebook page there. We are on Instagram at MFP Improv. The best thing to do for Music for People, anyways, get into our newsletter. So get onto our website and sign up there, and you'll be kept in touch with different things. This video will show up in a newsletter in a little bit, I know. Thank you again, Josée. Thank you for coming on, and have a great day. And we will be talking to you soon.
You're very welcome. Have a great day too. Okay, bye-bye.